Today is Wednesday, March 13th, and this is the Hendrick Hudson Board of Education meeting. Can I have a motion to open the meeting?
Motion to open the meeting.
Second. All in favor? Okay, the board will be entering executive session for the purpose of collective negotiations under the Taylor Law, medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment or employment or promotion or demotion or discipline or suspension or removal of a particular person or corporation. And the board will also be meeting with legal counsel to go over some district matters. Can I have a motion to enter exec?
Motion to enter exec.
Second. All in favor? Okay, the board will be back at approximately 7 p.m. Good evening. Today is Wednesday, March 13th, and this is the Hendrick Hudson Board of Education meeting. The board has just returned from executive session, and before we get into our agenda this evening, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Trombley to introduce to you. Oh, you want to do the pledge first? I'll say the pledge first. Okay, we can stand for the pledge first. Sorry, that's okay. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Remember, I do recognition first, your pledge. So, okay, Mr. Trombley, I'll let you take it from here and introduce our wonderful group that we have with us.
Thank you, President Bernard. Good evening, everyone. Just a note before we begin, if anybody is in need of translation services, please check in with Ms. Koch and she will provide you with the opportunity to access those. Best part of every meeting is sitting right over to my left. Tonight, we welcome members of our cast and crew.
Not me.
Yes. What not to do as a superintendent 101. Yes. Tonight, we welcome members of the cast and crew of The Little Mermaid. Before I call the show's director, Claire Carey, to the podium to introduce our wonderful students, I want to remind everyone, I'll give you a selfish plug, or shameless, not selfish, that this year's performance will feature 4 shows, Friday, March 15th at 7 p.m., Saturday, March 16th at 1 and at 7 p.m., and Sunday on March 17th at 1 and 7 p.m. I'm sorry, at 1 p.m. Tickets can be purchased at SHOWTIX for the number for you. So that's showtix4you.com. They're $15 for adults and $10 for students and ages 65 and over. Claire, thank you for being here, and we look forward to this.
Thank you very, very, very much. I appreciate the opportunity. One of the things that I'm most proud of our program, our theater program, is we are student run. Well, Mrs. Devlin and I are not students, but other than that, our children build the set. They use saws and hammers, and some of them have never seen a screwdriver before. They paint the sets. They do the sound. They mic the children. They operate the music for the show. They do all the lights. So it really is a tribute to all of our students, cast and crew, how much work they put into performing, and all the backstage people really put a lot of effort into it. So we're very proud of our students and of the program we have here. Tonight we'll be doing 2 songs from The Little Mermaid, and I think we don't need to listen to me. Although I do like a microphone. We're going to go right to it. So Mia O'Malley is our Ariel, and she will be singing Part of Your World. We went on tour today, so we have been to all 4 schools performing. So they've been performing since 7:30 this morning. We were on a bus racing from school to school, so I don't know what songs we're doing or not. So Part of Our World, Mia O'Malley. Oh, so the board may, because the next song, there's a little choreography. So if the board wouldn't mind, I think it would be better if you actually watched here, and we'll have them perform right in this open space here. So that you're all settled in, I'll have you get up. Come on, Enrique, it didn't kill you.
I'm waiting for the ladies.
Mia?
Don't worry about it.
stuff, isn't it neat? Wouldn't you think my collection's complete? Wouldn't you think I'm the girl who has everything? Look at this trove, treasures untold. How many wonders can one cavern hold? Looking around here you think, sure, she's got everything. I've got gadgets and gizmos aplenty. I've got who's its and what's its galore. You want 11 in the box? I've got 20. But who cares? No big deal. I want more. I wanna be where the people are. I wanna see them dancing, walking around on those, what do you call them? Oh, feet. Flipping your fins, you don't get too far. Legs are wired for jumping, dancing, strolling along down what's that word again? Street. Up where they walk, up where they run, up where they stay all day in the sun, wandering free. Wish I could be part of that world. What would I give if I could live out of these waters? What would I pay to spend a day warm on the sand? That young world, they understand that they don't reprimand their daughters. Bright young women, sick of swimming, ready to stand, ready to know what the people know. Ask them my questions and get some answers. What's a fire and why does it, what's the word? Burn. When's it my turn? Wouldn't I love to explore that shore of love? Out of the sea. Wish I could be part of your
Our next selection, if we could have our Mer sisters. So these are Ariel's 6 sisters and Flounder. Our productions for the last 17 years have been under the musical direction of Mrs. Erica Denler, and that is one of the reasons they sound as beautifully as they do sound.
Acting like a big fish in a small pond. Swimming upstream when everyone else is swimming down. You ask me, she's a Pisces. No question about it. She sure is acting fishy lately. Her head's up in the phone. Her eyes are big like everything. She floats away the days, floating on the coastal shell. You ask her where she's going, she giggles like a fool. She barely sticks her tail in down Athens out of pool. Face, she's just not herself. She ill, got the vacancy. She treats me like a she left over from my feet. See her late at night, talking in her ocean bed. Shoot, shoot, shoot. I remember all the Olivia walks. You shoot right up the tap, you raise her like a lock. And sure as doctors fight, something made her lose her head. She has lost her head. And she sighs, and she falls, even has a sort of glow. What on earth could it be? Any hammer I can see that side. I'm falling up. Oh no, she's in love. She's in love. How they switch. Well, don't you wonder who the one to do this? She's in love. She's in love. See her grin. Got to be like she's airing over someone swimming in the sea. K-I-F-N-I-N-G. Her cheeks going up her finger, clear as blue. She's got a glide and sinker, crushed out with gone, worked up far gone. Now her hanging deep like she's in love. She's in love. She's in love. She's in love. No mistake, no mistake. Look at those movies, look at those movies. Obvious, but they must be symptoms. Oh, she's in love. She's in love. She's in love. Yeah, yeah.
Well, whoever goes next, good luck. Following that. Thank you very much. I appreciate the board, Mr. Trombley, for allowing us to come and show you just a little bit of the opportunity you'll have if you come out and see us this weekend. We have over 150 costumes. It'll be quite a show. I'm very proud of the students. So thank you for your support, and we hope we'll see you this weekend. Thank you.
So, yeah, I know, I'm like, it's starting. It's 7:30. Where did this be? Maybe? And show quickly. Oh, show tickets. Show tickets.
Thank you to our cast and crew of The Little Mermaid. I hope everybody comes on one of the performance dates. It should be a whale of a good time. So don't be crabby. You won't leave crabby. And we hope you enjoy our students under the sea. Yeah, I just thought that. Sorry about that.
There's nothing on his.
There's nothing on the script.
Your wife is so proud.
Sorry. She's probably disowned me. I did take time. I, of course, was listening to our students, but I looked out into the audience. And I know everybody comes to board meetings to have a good time. But the smiles that our students brought not only reinforce that our students are fantastic and we're here for our students and our community supports our students, but it also shows the value of the fine arts. And I know that that is a common thread throughout this community that they value. And just that the performance brought smiles to a board meeting. We can we just looked at that. So thank you, everybody. President Burnett.
Okay. All right, to get started, I need to make a motion to, and I have a motion to approve our agenda this evening.
Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor? Great, that takes us right up to audience comments on non-agenda items.
For non-agenda items?
Yeah.
Mary Ellen has followed. Oh. On time. Ah. I hope that was good. Not prepared, really. Hold on. Good evening.
Okay. The whole community must think I have two personalities, as I've done a complete 360 here. I guess you can say that I do have two personalities. Their names are Victoria and Miguel. Everyone, and myself included, have become in such fight or flight mode that we have forgotten the very thing in front of our face, and that is our children. I became the parent that complained about buses and multiple emails. I have a child in every single elementary school. I am the case study. It hasn't always been practical, and we still need to address communication, but I survived. There is nothing more than I wanted than a K-5 school for my children, but I can't sit here and live in the what if. We lost our chance for K-5 schools, so I need to live in the now. And the now is that my children have been in this model for 2 years, have adjusted, and are happy. Or at least we're happy. My 4th grader, Victoria, is presently upset. She doesn't want to leave Furnace Woods, Mr. Cohen, or Mr. Glassoff. As a parent, I want to wipe away her tears and make it all better, but her future is now in your hands, not mine. My own son, a current 1st grader, now wants to go to BB, and we are zoned for Furnace Woods. He wants to be with the kids he met in kindergarten and 1st grade. They may not all be in the same class, but they have a higher chance of seeing each other in the same building during recess, holiday sing-alongs, and events. He invited 9 of his best buddies to his birthday recently, and only 2 of them are going to Furnace Woods with him. There are 1st graders in tears. At what point do you put aside the agenda and consider the humans that are involved? Around 3 years ago, the K-5 community school advocates were the majority. It was Furnace Woods and FGL that wanted to keep our schools as is. As time went on, the people that once attended my protest started to diminish. All they cared about in the end was that their kids were happy and with their friends. It's not about any of us in this room, it's about the kids. And I might add the teachers. They are the ones with our children 6 hours of the day. They are the ones developing and caring for our children. We need to listen to them. When teachers are happy, our children are happy. Morale is down, and I don't blame them. 3 years ago, when the board and superintendent ignored our plea, many of us were angry and in disbelief. Why are they not listening to us? The teachers, unlike 3 years ago, have been at this podium meeting after meeting, and their words have been ignored. A 3-minute time lapse until the next speaker. I am here as one last plea. It's not too late. There's still time to make it right. Put down the gloves, put aside any pride, and do what is best for the current children and these teachers, not the incoming pre-K. They will be fine too. Keep the schools as they are. You as a board have done amazing work in getting a new superintendent, and I'm grateful for that. The focus should now be on our education, communication, and programs, not packing up half the elementary staff and figuring it out all over again. New schedules, new bus routes, new cafeteria protocols, new everything. It's unnecessary. Us elementary families have been through enough change. Please give us some peace. Thank you.
Moving on to our consent agenda. Does anybody have anything for the consent agenda? May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Second? That's so many seconds. All in favor? Okay. We do have a donation this evening. The Hunter-Hudson School District has received a donation of the following musical instruments valued at $500 from Amadeus Strings.
And reveal. I think that's the size of the bows. So there's 6 violin bows total.
2 violas.
3 viola bows. Yeah, 3 violas and 3 cellos. The number in front is the size.
Yes. Yes. So looks like there's 6 total items under violins.
Yeah.
All right. Can I have a motion to approve this donation? All in favor? Right. Okay. That takes us up to our audience comment section on agenda items.
Good evening. I just have some questions and thoughts based on the post from this afternoon comparing our current plan with the Plan B. I saw a reduction in STEAM teachers from Plan A to B, from 3 to 2, but I thought that STEAM was going back to the classroom no matter what, so I'm curious about that. Do the teachers that are being repurposed for the AIS need training for their new roles, and has that been factored into this conversation? In both plans, there are only 2 art teachers. Honestly, that was news to me. I don't know how, but that means that they travel. And I'm wondering how it will work and if it's harder for them with the segregating of K-2 schools. I'm also wondering the human impact of having multiple teachers who have to travel around the buildings. None of what I saw really reflects the inefficiency of a traveling ENL teacher for one student, nor does it mention what other teachers might have to travel. It also doesn't reflect the inefficiency of having an ICT class for one classified student. The 1.5 full-time educator increase is a recurring cost that hasn't yet been reflected, but that's understandable. This was put together fast. The one-time moving fee could certainly be used to pay the salary of one of the administrators that you have to hire. And the 3.28 versus 4.1% tax differences between the plans might seem small, but it's not. And if we were to have the 3.28, which probably would go down to 3.18 because you still have $100,000 you're talking about, if we could bump that to 4 and put extra money in our fund balance, I'm unsure why that wouldn't be part of the conversation, because I honestly haven't heard anybody really talk about what we're doing for our fund balance. And Don Hoffman told us that we have to start that action now. Based on our current budget, you say there's still more to cut. So I imagine there's changes that'll be discussed tonight. The BOE generally has claimed that grade banding did not save the money it promised, but we started this process during COVID, which were some of the most expensive years of education for all schools. We need to spend more money for the reasons of safety and access. So I just think it's an unfair comparison that misleads people. And I'm just going to continue to talk about the lack of inclusion. The BOE and school administration have made only a few superficial attempts at genuine inclusion of all community members, often completely excluding entire groups of people and not considering other barriers to accessibility. The BOE has disregarded 90% of our educators who made it clear that they do not think Plan B is the right choice for our school district. Many of those teachers are also community members, and the BOE has disregarded the significant percentage of our students who will be transitioning to a new school for the 3rd straight year. So what I would like to see is that you make decisions that prove you care instead of just saying that you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to, do we have an undertaking? Moving on to our superintendent's report.
Thank you, President Gale. Good evening, everyone. As Claire said, it's going to be hard to follow our students, but I will try my best. We'll start off with some very good news. One of our fantastic educators, Logan Kraus, we've been informed by the Lower Hudson Regional Information Center, which is a component of BOCES. She has been selected as a recipient of the prestigious TEL Award for Outstanding Innovative Educator. Recipients of this award have demonstrated an outstanding innovative or strategic approach to technology integration within their school. So please join me in congratulating Logan, and we look forward to honoring her at the celebration dinner on April 10th. As a former winner of that award, I was allowed to sit on the selection committee for a number of years, and I can tell you the caliber of individuals who are nominated for that award is quite outstanding around our region. So I want to thank Lauren Scollins for nominating Logan, and Benita Joy, our Executive Director of Technology and Innovation, for her support of their efforts. So thank you for that. Additionally, just a reminder about kindergarten registration. You may visit our homepage. There is a large blue button on the right-hand side, and it opened on January 16th, 2024. Your child must be 5 years old of age by December 1st to register for kindergarten. And we are in the process of finalizing plans to ensure that we can open up our UPK registration. You should see a nice big exclamation point letting you know that when you do go to our homepage. And in the next few weeks, you'll see information about a redesigned website that will provide you instructions on how to navigate that and look at some of the fantastic redesign. A reminder, if you are a parent or guardian who plans to have children attend a non-public school, you must notify our transportation department in an official capacity by April 1st, 2024. And that official request form can be found on our website under the department tab by selecting transportation. Just a reminder as well of an upcoming event due to parent-teacher conferences. Elementary school students in all 3 schools will have an early release this Friday, March 15th. Lunch will not be served prior to dismissal that day, and the scheduled dismissal, departure and pickup times at each school. Furnace Woods will be at 10:50 a.m. Buses depart at 11. Parent pickup will be at 11. From Buchanan Verplank, 11:45 is dismissal. Buses will depart at 11:55, and parent pickup is at 11:35. For Frank G. Lindsay, it's an 11:45 a.m. dismissal. Our buses will depart at 11:55, and parent pickup is at 11:56 a.m. And for our pre-K students at Frank G. Lindsay, parent pickup will be at 11:15 a.m. Tonight, we continue our budget development process. Over the past several months, our team has diligently worked to craft a budget that reflects our commitment to excellence in education while also being mindful of our fiscal responsibilities. The proposed budget being given to the board on March 27th will meet all parameters in the request that the Board of Education has made of the administration. One of the key initiatives we undertook this year was the implementation of zero-based budgeting process. This approach allowed us to thoroughly scrutinize every dollar spent and ensure resources are allocated efficiently and effectively. Furthermore, on March 2nd, the board conducted a comprehensive line-by-line review of the proposed budget at that stage. This detailed examination provided us with invaluable insights as administration into the financial needs of our district and allowed us to make informed decisions about further resource allocation going forward. I'm proud to report that the budget that we will ask you to adopt will be the result of these hard months of work and careful consideration. It is a budget that will reflect our commitment to providing the highest quality education to our students, while also being mindful of financial constraints facing our district. I urge each and every one of you to support this budget and adoption on March 27th as we continue the process. The process through which it has been developed was transparent and collaborative, and meets the parameters that the board has set forth to the administration. With the Board of Education's unanimous support, we can continue to ensure that our schools have the resources they need to continue to thrive and succeed. And thank you for your dedication, because the process is not easy. It's time consuming. I know you read all of the information that is put forth before you, and there's a lot of information to digest. So thank you for taking time away from your families to go through this transparent process. And there are no follow-ups from any previous Board of Education meetings on community comments. And at this time, I know they're watching, and I'm supposed to tell my kids to go to bed. Listen to your mother.
Okay. Great. At this time, we come to our presentation discussion. And our first presentation is the program budget for the Hendrick Hudson Free Library.
Good evening. Unfortunately, the library board wasn't able to make their presentation in song and dance today, so I do have a little speech here. President Bernard, members of the Hendrick Hudson School District Board and Administration, and fellow community members. My name is Kevin Quigley, and I'm the president of the Board of Trustees for the Hendrick Hudson Free Library. I am here tonight along with our library director, Jill Davis, and our trustees, Cynthia Neff and Phil Brandon. We're going to present the proposed library budget for fiscal year 2024 to 2025 and to request this proposal be included on the ballot to be presented to the public on May 21st. Before we get to our proposal, I'd like to talk about our library for a minute. First of all, I'm the son of 2 librarians who met fittingly in a library. While most patrons don't share my direct lineage, every one of the 75,000 people who came through the doors this year have a personal connection and benefited from the library. Maybe you are the owner of one of the over 700 passports we processed, helping you whisk away for a long dream trip. Anybody use it? Show of hands? Yeah. Well, if you need it, you should go. You save yourself hours of time. Yeah. And you get to work for great staff. Or you might have been one of the 9,000 patrons that used our study rooms preparing for an exam. Maybe you were one of the 200 families that used our free museum passes in New York City. Or simply one of the 16,000 people who attended over our one of 1,000 programs that we offered this past year. That's an average of 3 a day, and it's curated for patrons of all ages and stages. How else does the library benefit you in the community? In 2023, we circulated over 125,000 items, And also addressing how people consume their media today. Over 25% of those items were electronic books or streaming services. And speaking of streaming, we keep adding services to meet the community needs, including Medici TV, which is classical music, opera and dance, Mango Languages, so you can learn new languages, and The Shelf, which is a Spanish language multimedia entertainment streaming service, and more are on the way. Our commitment to sustainability remains strong with our recycling programs. Community members bring their plastic batteries, K-cups, and unwanted books to us so we can be sure they are disposed of or reused in an environmentally sustainable way. And I don't know if you've walked around our building, but the benefit's not limited inside them. Next time you visit, please take a walk around our library. We've added outdoor elements like our story walk, or bang on one of our 3 musical instruments on the front lawn before joining us on one of our many outdoor concerts this spring and summer. We've continued our partnership with the district by offering after-school homework to help K-5 students. They met 72 times throughout the school year, working with volunteers and staff to complete daily assignments and having a bit of fun with educational games. Not limited to helping just kids, we also began an adult E&O program late last year with 10 beginner students and 18 intermediate students. The library even provides the instructor with grant money. These are just a couple examples of the continued collaboration between the library and the school district. In the last few minutes, we've just scratched the surface of what the Hen Hud Free Library brings to this community's table. And the Cortland taxpayers get all of these benefits for an average of less than $5 a week per household. And that includes the proposed increase, I'm about to say. And that's cheaper than a Starbucks or a Dunkin' Donuts visit. So on to the numbers. The library's proposed 2024-2025 budget reflects a 5.1 levy increase, which is a 3.5% budget-to-budget increase. This represents, in dollar terms, approximately $66,692 increase over last year. And frankly, most of that increase goes to hiring a full-time janitor, which we currently do not have. This is our janitor. The average taxpayer in the town of Cortland will see an annual increase of $1.67 per thousand of assessed value, and Peekskill taxpayers will see an annual increase of 85 cents per thousand assessed value. So for the average taxpayer living in the town of Cortland, this means your library services will cost approximately $252 a year. And the residents of Peekskill, that number will be $139 a year. The board's goal is to meet the community's evolving needs with services and programs for all. And we feel this budget reflects our continued commitment to meeting that goal. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and to present the library's proposed budget that will be included on the May 21st ballot. Thanks again and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you didn't do yourself justice on the partnership that you have. You do so much more for us. In my short time being here, you've hosted meetings for us. You assist us with family registration. So we are certainly, from the administration standpoint, and I know the board, we value the partnership that you have and hope we'll continue on that strong partnership. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're going to come up next week. The council. Okay.
Great. Right. Well, we get Mr. Geis on the line. I will let Mr. Trombley officially introduce it, but this is our Using Data for Continuous School Improvement with Mr. Bradley Geis. Okay.
He's there.
He's there. All right. You want to give a nice warm introduction?
Sure. So in a few minutes, I'll read the fantastic biography to introduce Bradley Geis, but I just want to provide a little context of why we're having Brad here. Brad came to us in the spring as part of the board and the district's efforts to implement site-based teams for shared decision purposes. The purpose behind that team is to provide stakeholder input on how to best service our students. We wanted the focus to be on a research-based approach when we make decisions. And Brad and his team at the Foundation Education for the Future They focus on research-based best practices focused on student outcomes. And I won't steal his thunder, but I worked with Brad all the way back since 2011 when I was a director of technology, and I had to upload the data for him. And I'm much happier to be on this end, sorry, Vanita, to see how that process works. So I'm going to introduce Brad here because he does have an extensive bio, but it shows the level of excellence that is being supportive of our site-based teams. He worked with those site-based teams on the process, and we wanted to have him present in our January board meeting while it was still fresh in everybody's mind, but unfortunately the timing didn't work. So Bradley J. Geis is the Senior Director of Education for the Future, an organization dedicated to fostering continuous school improvement through data analysis. Brad has over 30 years of experience, and he's been instrumental in guiding learning organization toward using data effectively to enhance teaching and learning. Education for the Future, founded as a nonprofit initiative at California State University, Chico, has documented their extensive work in 22 books emphasizing the importance of data analysis in driving improvement. And I want you to keep that in mind. The sole purpose of the work is focused on student outcomes. And that's the essence of what Brad's work is. His expertise lies in comprehensive data analysis, facilitation, systemic improvement, effective leadership strategies, and long-term capacity building for organizations of all sizes, both nationally and internationally. He has authored and contributed to various publications, white papers, and software applications aimed at enhancing data engagement for school improvement. Brad conducts workshops, conference sessions, data institutes, webinars, and directs comprehensive data services to support continuous improvement school efforts. Brad is married to Beth, who's also an elementary teacher, and they have 3 children, Benjamin, Ella, Jean, and Anna. Sorry, they should say 4 children. So I apologize for that, Brad, but I would like to introduce good friend and colleague, Brad Geis. Oh,
good evening. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
You can see me okay? So everyone's excited to talk about data after The Little Mermaid, I'm sure. So let me, thanks for the intro, Mike. Let me emphasize a couple of things out of the intro real quickly. Number one, I work for a nonprofit that was founded through a university. So I don't sell products or things like that. I actually work for an organization founded as a nonprofit. We help learning organizations use data for continuous school improvement. The second part is, what Mike discussed was we've published 22 books about data analysis for continuous school improvement. The one book that is data analysis for continuous school improvement that's in its 4th edition is used throughout your state. It's used at the state level, it's used at the RIC level, it's used at the BOCES level, it's used at the school level. So the work that we're talking about here is congruent throughout the state. It's not unique just to your district necessarily. There's some congruence throughout the state. So it's connected in a lot of different ways. The third thing that you should know is that I'm not an external evaluator. So I do not go into districts and look at their data and tell them what they need to do to improve. What I do is I give them a framework, a data model, and facilitation to use data effectively and to engage staff in school improvement strategies relative to using data. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that this evening, and then give you an opportunity to ask some specific questions if you'd like. So if we're good with all that, then I'll just kind of dive in and talk about some big picture concepts relative to data analysis and continuous school improvement. And I think you'll be able to see the parallels and how it all fits together and how it benefits the district at multiple levels. So when I came out in November, we worked with leadership teams from each of the schools and I break down the work of data analysis and school improvement into 3 big ideas typically. The first is why data analysis continues school improvement. I think in order to present this information to you and to really engage folks as good consumers in data analysis for continuous school improvement, it's important to understand these 3 concepts. Number one, why should we be looking at data in the first place? What's the reference? And then what framework and data should we be using? And then third, how do we engage all staff in the process of improvement? So these 3 big ticket items, I think, are helpful in helping us understand the big picture of data analysis and school improvement and where this is going. Why is probably the most important question, because most folks come to data analysis with a compliance mindset. They immediately go to compliance for accountability, what needs to be reported outside the district, how we're being held accountable. That perspective, if that is your sole strategy and your sole focus with respect to school improvement, is very, very, very harmful. So if we're just reactive to negative results, if we're just focused on compliance for accountability, and that's our sole school improvement strategy, it marginalizes anything that's not tested. So let me give you an example. This is what you see on the screen. Hopefully you can see this okay. My wife, believe it or not, an educator, she was awarded California Elementary Educator of the Year last year, amazingly enough. And if you take a look at the screen, she made it on CNN with this story. She takes her class to an Alzheimer's facility once a month. And if you take a look at the woman sitting in the chair at the middle, she turned 108, and she broke up her class into groups of 3 and 4, and they put on skits for every decade of her life to celebrate her birthday. So she was written up in a national magazine. So when you consider this scenario and using data, most of what this whole scenario is all about is not traditionally tested. If we're just looking at student learning data and reacting to negative results, most of what you see engaged in this scenario would be marginalized, would be put to the side and not engaged. We basically have two options when it comes to focusing on data analysis. We have to be really clear about what we're evaluating ourselves against. And sometimes school improvement is more about what's not traditionally tested than what is. So we need a model, we need a data model and a framework that engages both equally. One of the things that I've seen in 30 years, if you had to ask me, hey, you've been doing this work for 30 years, you've published a bunch of books, you've done all this work in different types of learning organizations. To give you an idea, in the last year, I was in Saudi Arabia, Australia, Canada, a number of states in the US. One thing that I see pretty commonly is that if folks just react to negative test results, anything not traditionally tested is marginalized. And that service learning aspect that you saw in the Alzheimer's care facility is not traditionally tested. What's tested is important, but the context of all of that is much larger, and it's focused on vision. So data analysis, the first thing that we did when we started working together with leadership teams is talk about, we need to be really clear about what we're evaluating ourselves before we use any data whatsoever, right? And the big idea is you either have the option of compliance for accountability or focus on shared vision. And so I introduced the concept of vision as a focus for continuous school improvement. The definition for vision is up on the screen. Vision defines the desired or intended future state of your organization or enterprise in terms of its fundamental objectives relative to key core areas. So for schools, vision is focused on agreements about what we're all about relative to curriculum, instruction, assessment, and environment. And so this is what we evaluate ourselves, is this idea of mission and vision at the core of everything that we do. So again, when you're using data, you basically have two options. You either just solely focus on compliance for accountability, or you focus on mission and vision, one or the other. Vision is inclusive of this bigger idea of what we're all about as a learning organization. The idea of service learning, for instance, embedded into curriculum, instruction, assessment, environment. So what you would see is, you would see a lot of different elements. And in my wife's particular example, you would see service learning woven into each one of these areas as a focus for improvement. So if we can agree that vision has to be the core of what we do in terms of using data and how we evaluate ourselves, then we need a framework. And I think you have a handout packet that was provided for you that you can write on, and it would be great to have that out and grab a pen, because I'm going to give you a few tips and tricks and some shortcuts in interpreting some of the stuff that's part of that packet. But folks at the November sessions received the same packet, and if you look at the framework that's up on the screen, this is the framework that we've published relative to continuous school improvement and data analysis. We published this in 20 of our 22 books. The proper nouns and the reference around the framework itself change in the ed world over time, how people refer to this. But let me just tell you that any process of improvement has 4 big ticket items that are associated with it. The first is the discovery phase. In discovery, you're using data to figure out what do we know, what don't we know? What do we have? What do we need? What are we doing well? What do we need to do better? So you have discovery, that's where you are right now. Then you have vision, that's where you want to be. Then you have improvement planning or strategic planning, which is how you're going to get from where you are now to where you want to be. And then you should have evaluation. And yes, there should be a connection between district-wide strategic planning and the continuous school improvement planning that's going on at the sites. They should be connected, right? And so any process of improvement, regardless of who you talk to, what it's all about, has 4 big ticket items: discovery, vision, plan, and evaluation. In New York State right now, the common referent or proper noun that's used to refer to the discovery phase is conducting a comprehensive needs assessment. I don't know if you've heard that terminology thrown around of doing a needs assessment. The needs assessment is the same as going through a discovery phase. It's the same thing. Now, I get a little bit of pushback from folks that sell services to schools because we have differing ideas about what a comprehensive needs assessment really is. And so depending on what you're being sold, that definition kind of changes sometimes. So it's you want to be clear about what the components of an effective comprehensive needs assessment are when you're getting into doing that work. So, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But basically, what I did when I came out for the workshop is talk to educators from each one of your schools about the importance of mission and vision, and then place that vision within a framework for improvement. You'll see that vision doesn't come first. Vision comes after the discovery phase. This is super important. You've got to go through a comprehensive discovery phase to figure out what are we doing well, what do we need to do better, all that good stuff before you put the vision in place. Otherwise, the vision is going to be filled with a lot of that information that's both indicative of what we're doing well and what we're not technically. So you got to go through the discovery phase first to put a vision that's real for you together for your schools. And what I modeled for them was how to go through and use data to start collecting information and work. We worked mostly in that discovery phase for the 2 days that we had together, modeling what it would look like as they use data with their staffs. So the framework is one thing in terms of the what. The why is the vision. The what is the framework. The second piece is using multiple measures of data. You're not going to be able to see this really well, so you're going to want to turn in your packets to this graphic. And it's got multiple measures of data on it. This graphic is the most stolen graphic in the history of our organization. People have taken it and used it in a lot of different places. But basically the term multiple measures of data or comprehensive data analysis, those kind of terms were coined in our office and as a part of the work that we've done over data analysis and school improvement. This graphic is very, very telling. It presents the alternative to being just reactive to negative results. It talks about comprehensive data analysis. So the first bubble you see is demographics. I'm not going to give you a full-blown presentation on each one of these areas of data, but if you look at it, it's pretty self-explanatory. Demographic data basically tells you and gets everyone engaged with who we are as a learning organization, what trends and patterns are we seeing in our organization over time. I'm working in a series of Navajo schools in New Mexico right now, and they have gone from 6 to 60% Navajo in 6 years. Major demographic shifts. I'm working in Portland, Oregon right now. They have seen a significant demographic shift of 90% over 10 years. That means the community is 90% different demographically than it was 10 years ago. These are major demographic shifts, right? And so you want to be clear about who we are as a community, who we serve, what we're all about. And a lot of the time it comes down to looking at your demographic data and noticing that the same kids fall into, for instance, free reduced lunch, special ed, and a high degree of behavioral incidents. What does that tell us as we look across our demographics and see how we're organized and what's happening within our schools demographically. The second piece is that perceptions bubble. Perceptions are all about school culture, climate, and environment. You administered questionnaires earlier this year in your schools. Those were an assessment of school culture, climate, and environment. And this is critical. This is a critical bit of data that you should be using in your schools. It talks about things like having choice, being challenged, being engaged, things like that. Teachers caring about me, how kids feel about the learning environment, how teachers feel about the learning environment. And you're getting stakeholder feedback from staff, students, and parents in a very structured and specific way and comprehensive way, and you're engaging it as part of multiple measures, okay? So those questionnaires are never an action-reaction tool directly. They're woven into multiple measures of data, and I'll walk you through it real quickly as soon as I get through this. Student learning data is pretty self-explanatory, right? So student learning data are student outcome data. And you've got a ton of that. And that data is usually overemphasized within learning organizations. To be honest with you, it's usually the last data that I use. I use demographic data and I use climate and environment data to help better explain our student learning results, right? So usually, ironically enough, you've got a ton of it, but usually save it for last because it makes more sense because it's outcome data to be used on the tail end of data analysis most frequently. The last piece, school process data, is super important. Basically, anytime your schools use data, they should be focusing on identifying, owning, internalizing, improving school programs and processes. And that's the whole enchilada. That's the whole deal, right? Okay, so let me walk you through my working with Navajo schools example so that I'll just give you a little case study of walking through multiple measures of data. Okay, so demographic data, I already described some of the Navajo demographic data. We saw that it went from 6 to 60% Navajo in 6 years. That was pretty significant. We saw that those kids were receiving the bulk of the behavioral incidents. They were also a lot of the free and reduced lunch kids. So we're starting to see some demographic trends and patterns in the shifting demographics of our school community. We looked at school climate and environment, and lo and behold, we find that the Navajo kids are less connected to school and teacher than everyone else, right? Big surprise. We're seeing a shifting demographic within our schools. We're seeing them less connected to school and teacher than everyone else. And then when we look at their reading scores, they were less positive than everyone else's. So then when we go to the program and we start to dig into it, we can see the role that identity and shifting identity of our community plays in how we might need to reshape our programs to reach those kids so that they can see themselves reflected in curriculum, instruction, assessment, and environment. So it's working that around and using the data to help you see a bigger picture of who you are as a community, how you're organized. That's really important. So those multiple measures of data are focused all throughout the framework for improvement. You're engaging them all throughout, right? And so you've got a framework. The why is vision. The what is the framework and multiple measures of data. And now how is the biggie. Let me make a bold statement. Here we go. Bold statement of the night. You will get improvement to the degree that you engage stakeholders in the process of improvement. And so engaging staffs in the process of improvement is absolutely essential. And coming to consensus about need and strategies about using data and all that good stuff are really super important. So to be honest with you, out of 2-day workshop that we did in November, the first morning was spent on core concepts around vision, the framework, and multiple measures of data. And the rest of the time that we were together, I was modeling with them and for them data strategies. And I'm going to share a couple with you right now. I'm going to go back to the comprehensive needs assessment and put up on the screen 3 very specific data strategies that learning organizations should be engaged in relative to improvement. So the first one is you should be looking at trends and patterns in your data. So when we got educators together during the workshop, we went through and looked at some of the questionnaire data and went through trends and patterns. You should be looking at problem-based analysis. So how do educators get together and solve problems? And then how do we get into program and process improvement based on what 1 and 2 are telling us? And so I think what you'll like here is you'll like seeing some of the tools that are used and how it creates a transparent process of improvement so that you as a board can see how are they using data, what data are they using, how are they analyzing it, what are their findings of data, what analysis did they come up with, and what are the action items that are created as a result of how they use data. And so generally speaking, boards are pretty excited about that part of it because they can see transparently how it all fits together. So the first piece, looking at trend and pattern analysis, is the first part of that framework on the very top. And it's about where we are now and looking at multiple measures of data. So basically what we did with them is we pulled out and looked at perceptual data as part of that second bubble. And we basically looked at that data and we used this template to process the data. And what we modeled was individual to small group to large group work within a staff. Let me say that again, individual to small group to large group work within a staff. And we modeled that using this tool. It's in your handout packet. And this is pretty simple tool. They basically look through the data and plot out what do they see as strengths, what do they see as challenges, and then what are some implications for the plan and what additional data do they want to use? Okay, does everyone have this sitting in front of you? Because this little tool seems a little bit, it's kind of like a little sneak attack. It's a little sneaky in how you use it and what you can see through it. But take a look. The strengths and challenges are pretty straightforward. The strengths and challenges. Now, remember this, you're going from individual work where staff members are individually looking at data and processing it themselves using this tool. Then they move to small group, which is like teams of 6, and they're putting it on poster paper. Then we're going across the whole room and getting consensus across the staff using the poster paper, created in teams of 6. So individual work to small group to do the analysis, going to large group for consensus. But check this out. The most important part of this tool is, do you see the challenges box? The implications are staff coming up with solutions relative to what they see as challenges. So the implications for the plan are really otherwise stated. That's a researchy way of saying, what are the action items that we need to engage to address the challenges that we saw in the data? This is critical because, number one, everyone should want to see, hey, they've identified challenges and now this is what they want to do about it, right? But this is the deal. You should never, ever, ever engage educators in using data without giving them a voice in the process of change, ever. It creates, if you just have them identify need over and over, it creates a lot of negative dissonance, which is very unhealthy. What you want to do is create dissonance in developing the challenges and then give them a voice in the process of change. And that helps them leverage their expertise and process the dissonance in a positive way, right? So that little study sheet is really pretty sneaky in terms of how you leverage it in individual, small group, and large group work. And really interesting to see how that goes. So we used one area of data. You would use that strategy with multiple measures of data, meaning you would do it separately with each one of the circles that you see on the screen. We just took one questionnaire data for the purposes of the workshop that we had in November as a way to model that strategy and how you do it with staff. Okay, so that doing trend and pattern analysis is really, really super important. I would say most of the time when people tell me about their district, and I think it even happened when Mike was moving into this job, he's talking to me and he's describing demographically immediately what your district is all about. Some of that data and looking at trends and patterns is really important data to look at. Secondarily, you have to have a congruent process that also is aligned with solving problems. You need to have a problem-based approach that is congruent. This is a problem. Let me show you a problem and put it up on the screen. This is different than trend and pattern-based analysis. This is problem-based analysis. So you should have these two strategies going at the same time, and they should be congruent, meaning pointed in the same direction. So this is problem-based analysis. This is the second question in the framework. And basically what you're doing is I gave them this tool, which is a problem-solving cycle, which allows them to engage staff in looking through problems more deeply. And I'll walk you through an example really quickly if you'd like to see it. So here's a typical problem. Basically, you can turn in your handout packet, there are problem solving cycles in there, and you'll see the steps. I'll walk you through the first couple steps of it right now. But basically, the first step is identifying a problem. We did this in teams using poster paper together. So you identify a problem that you want to solve using data. And do you see that this is a student learning based problem? Not enough students are proficient in math. And then what you have to do, the next step is you have to generate 20 hunches or hypotheses about why you think the problem exists. So staff are doing this. So take a look at the screen. Here is a staff's first 10 hunches or hypotheses about why not enough students are proficient in math. So check out the first. Too many students live in poverty, lack of parent support, too much student mobility, students aren't prepared for school. Do you see how staff are brainstorming their hunches and hypotheses about why we don't have enough students proficient in math? So they're going down and they're talking about a lot of hunches and hypotheses. A lot of these are outwardly focused, though. Do you see how that works when you're generating some of those initial hunches or hypotheses? Let me show you the next 10. The next 10, the perspective shifts a little bit. We don't know what data, we don't know how to use the data, we don't get this data soon enough to make a difference. Not all our curriculum aligned to standards. Teachers don't know. They start to brainstorm within their staffs hunches or hypotheses about why this problem exists. Do you see number 19? Take a look at 19. That's a program or process that's embedded in the school that they've identified using data that's linked with not enough students are proficient in math. So just through this brainstorming process of laying out their hunches and hypotheses, it tells you quite a bit. But basically then what you have to do is you have to develop a series of questions and data needed to validate or invalidate those hunches and hypotheses, right? So what you're doing is you're going back to multiple measures and saying, how can we pull in that data to help us quantify whether these hunches or hypotheses are real or not? So there's an alignment that occurs when you're problem solving. This is what we perceive to be the issue. That may or may not be factually correct. We need to go through the data and see if that's true or not. And so there's an alignment that's taking place relative to problem solving. So there's two different strategies that are going on, the trend and pattern-based analysis and the problem-based analysis collectively. If you turn your handouts to this page, you're going to love this because it's called the aggregated implications for the planning. Basically what this is as staffs go through and use data and identify need, any time that they come up with an action item relative to data, it gets recorded into this document. So what we worked on was we're modeling these different data strategies, and then how do they record the findings of their data analysis in a single document? Okay, so let me take this opportunity to make an advanced point with very little time to set it up appropriately, and hopefully we just write it together. Everyone's taking a look at this document, right? Each of your schools and the district would have a separate document that you'd be able to look at across the schools and at the district level to plot what are they seeing in data and what are the action items associated with each. And we went through this process and we started to develop implications from each of the sites. And I think what we saw was that about 80 to 90% of the content developed by each school was consistent across the entire group. Really interesting to see. But let me describe this again, because this is an abstract concept when you haven't got in and actually applied it. This is where staff would go after they do that data analysis that I've described, and they would identify, they would take the implications for what they found in data analysis. what they feel like their next steps need to be, and they would record them all in this single document. Everyone in the district would be able to see, aha, this is school X. They've been looking at data this way. This is how they've been analyzing it. Here's a summary of their findings. This is basically the summary report for their comprehensive needs assessment. These are action items associated with all the need that they identified in their data. And so basically, I walked them through. This was one of the breakouts that we used. I had them go through and document the implications or action items developed as a result of identifying need in their data analysis, and the schools kind of they went through that facilitation of how they would do that with their staffs. The last part, there's no way that I can do this justice in kind of a webinar format with X amount of minutes during a board meeting, because number 3 is pretty deep. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to turn in your handout packets to this page right here. This is called the program evaluation template. And I'm just going to talk about one thing really quickly in terms of how they use data and where this all leads to. Okay, does everyone see that? Do you have it all? Because there's no way you're going to be able to read it on the screen. It's too micro. Unfortunately, I apologize for that. But okay, so take a look at this template. Do you see the left-hand column? When you're using data, when staffs are using data, basically what falls out is that there's a hierarchy of things that they find that they need to work on within their school. And so they might decide, hey, we want to work on math first. Math is the program that we're going to work on. So basically what they do you want me to give you a page number? I see you guys are kind of.
Yeah. It doesn't say you sent me, Brad. This is not what you sent me. So sorry to tell you that.
No, it's 10. It's page 10. It's 10 and 11.
It's the highlights where it says 257 on the top.
Oh,
exactly that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So he has 11 up here. Our 11 is what I think.
We have 10 and 11. 10 and 11. It's a continuation of it.
Okay. Are we good?
Yes.
We're good, Brad.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to make this more complicated than it has to be. I got to tell you, everyone, listen to I can't emphasize this enough. This is the point at which the data analysis that the educators are engaging has to turn into change. They need to apply data to a change process within their schools. We don't have a lot of competition when it comes to this, using a tool like this. A lot of folks are really good at data analysis, but applying it to a change process, a quantifiable change process, is pretty deep. This tool is kind of a great one-pager that kind of walks you through the process. But when you've collected all that data and you've been aggregating the implications and recording all of that information, basically staffs decide, what are we going to work on first? And what they do in that left-hand column is enter in all the findings of data analysis from the work that they've done so far that relate to, in this case, working on math. And so the left-hand column gets filled with the data analysis that's relevant to math, and they start working from left to right to redesign math as a program within their schools. So take a look at the next columns on the template. Based on what the data is telling them, what's the purpose of the program or process? How do we redefine the purpose? Then what are the intended outcomes? Who is the program intended to serve? Who's being served? Who's not being served? The next column, how should the program or process be implemented with integrity and fidelity to ensure attainment of intended outcomes? Next, how is implementation being monitored? How should it be monitored? To what degree is it being implemented with integrity and fidelity? And then you'll see the last 2 columns are about measuring the results and evaluating. So basically what they're doing is they're taking the findings of data analysis and applying it to program redesign, right? Based on what the data is telling them. Anything that they don't, when they get to implementation, that implementation column, the left-hand side, that's usually where the wheels fall off a little bit. Because that's where they have to describe the changed practice, and this is where they have to process a lot of information at any given time. So do you see the implications box that's going to be at the bottom of page 11 for you? It's the bottom of the second page. That's where they would record, hey, we want professional learning in X, or we need support doing this or that. And so when the translation for you, I think, is you get to see how they go through a program redesign process, and then what are the asks that they're making based on how they want to redesign the way that they're going to work. And you're going to be able to see it embedded within the program itself, right? So I apologize. This is a much bigger, we spent the whole second morning just on this one tool. So we spent a good 3 hours just working with and walking through this tool and how they would engage that. So basically the first step is to go through program redesign. The second step would be then to go to implementation and start to flowchart how they're going to redefine their implementation based on the program redefinition. So in your handout packet, there's a bunch of flowcharts in there, and that's why there are flowcharts in there, because after they redesign the program, then what they do is they redesign how they're going to implement it. And so that might be different instructional strategies or things like that, and creating a visualization of those and how they might rework those based on how they're going to work differently. And so that's kind of the core of the work that we did together. The last thing that I did with them is I revisited this idea of mission and vision. I took them back up to this idea of vision and asked them, basically, we've done this work over 2 days. We've looked into data and how we facilitate and how we use data, how we can redesign our programs to get different results, right? How would that help inform a shared vision for curriculum, instruction, assessment, and environment? One last thing that I would share with you is, remember the example of my wife with service learning. What you would end up with are these tools. You'd be looking at data that tells us about the value of service learning. And when you get to the program design, you'd be able to see service learning embedded in the program itself. You'd see the things that are tested embedded with the things that are not necessarily tested. But they're all being quantified, right, in how we evaluate and how we use data. They all live together so that you can see how they create a larger vision for achievement and what we want our kids to know and be able to do. The difference is this: you're not just trying to create the best engineer when you're educating kids in the community. You're trying to create the best engineer that applies that knowledge through a lens of community-based values and beliefs that your schools define for their communities, right? So that's where this all comes together, is we use data that's inclusive of those ideas. And then we also use tools and resources that allow us to connect achievement, what's tested with what's not tested, and that larger picture of vision and what we want to have happen for our schools. So that is the digest version, I would say. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. I apologize if that felt a little bit like drinking through the fire hose, but that's especially when you get to the program or process place. Most of data analysis is about experiencing the facilitation to truly internalize it and understand those different pieces. And so describing it just verbally sometimes is not as sufficient. So.
Thank you, Brad. Any questions from the Board of Education?
I don't think I actually have any questions for Brad. Maybe, but so did all of our building leaders go to this room?
Yes, our site-based teams who our principals are part of were there, yes.
So all the site-based team, anyone who's on the site-based team and the lead and
yes.
Okay, so then we're looking to try to use this tool to try to steer us and how we make decisions on what actions we're going to take. What do we need to improve upon and how we're going to improve it?
So I wouldn't say tool, I'd say the process.
Okay.
And Brad will always bring us back to the continuous school improvement process. And these tools that he shared with you are a way to help dive into that process in a cohesive manner. And the idea was this work started before I came on board, but I've done the work in previous districts. So the idea of having this training for those site-based teams was you've established these shared decision-making committees. How do they share in making decisions? And we wanted it to be a focus on student outcomes. That's why we exist as a school district, is to improve student outcomes. So that's why Brad was brought in to really give that framework. And it's not just a 1 or 2 day thing. We have to regroup. As soon as we left that, we had some other decisions that the district was engaged in. And now we're in budget season. So I think it's best our site-based teams are still working. We've given them the charge of what to focus on for the remainder of the year. The elementary, it's preparing for next year. And at the secondary, it's taking a look at some of the items that we've explored in our budget process, such as looking at our schedule, those types of things. So we've gotten away from it, Brad, but don't smack my hand. We're going to talk about next steps once we get through the budget season.
Oh, this is interesting, cool. I feel like you could use this process in business or in any decision. Thank you.
Do we have plans to do more perception data yearly and ask like surveys to the staff and to families to see how everything's going so that we can continually improve?
Sure. Yes, I would make that recommendation. You have not seen a line item in our overall proposed budget for this work. So Brad, I have to regroup with you on that. Sorry, we haven't had a chance to talk. If you're still listening. But I would make a recommendation, particularly in next year's budget development, after our site-based teams have had some time to cohese, that we need to come back to that perception data, because that perception data is the first step in that process of helping define mission and vision of the district as well. I know you've done some work in that prior to this. It doesn't negate that work, but also perhaps on those shared decision-making committees, how they operate as well too, how they choose making decisions. Brad, would you have anything to add? So if you were taking a look at a district who engaged initially in this work, knowing that we are going to be coming back to it, sustaining it through that time frame that we are not necessarily focused on this, your thoughts? Doable, not doable?
Definitely doable. I mean, I never get, you'll laugh at this, but no one ever approaches me and says, hey, this is the perfect scenario. You can have the perfect situation, the exact time that you want to do everything, with our staff that you think is what they say is we want it all. And you have 2 hours on a Friday to get it all together and get it done or whatever, it fits into a larger process. The one thing that I will tell you though, is that you shouldn't look at that framework and say, okay, we're throwing everything else out. And now the framework is in place so that you can figure out what do we have and what do we need as a district? What do we have? What do we need? What are we doing well? What could we be doing better? And so it's not like you're ever starting from scratch. The framework has been around for long enough that it's used for accrediting schools. It's used in a lot of different places. So it's never a word. So if you've done visioning work in the past, if you've done mission and vision work, I would say, great. We need to plug that into the framework and we need to make it monitorable and measurable. Right. And so I think that helps with perspective relative to what Mike was just describing.
And then as we're approaching, I know later half of the school year, we start looking at our school data, right? We ask each school to present. I think based just on this, a lot of times or from when I would attend meetings, we're focusing on the student learning. Can we also start to include like the attendance of the attendance rates of our students? Any processes that we're already putting in place, like how many students started in AIS, like start looking at all of the big picture of the whole child instead of just the student data that we're getting from test boards, just state test. Was I ready?
Yes, so you don't know me very well, but Greg, could you put up the multiple measures of data slide?
Yeah, that's I think we need to
as you get to know me better, if you come to me with a I think I feel statement, my mind goes back to this slide. In fact, Brad, I think you might have saved my career at one point. You didn't even know it because I stole this image on the first day that I had, bless you, in a district. I don't know if I stole it because I own a book that has it. So But I was asked by that district in a board meeting, are we a good district? And this is literally my first board meeting, welcoming there, and they say, board president said, are we a good district, and why do you think so? And I said, oh boy. And I said, well, what do you mean? They go, well, we went down in our U.S. News and World Report ranking, and we went down in our niche ranking. And I said, I think you're asking the wrong question. You're focused on two outcomes that you don't necessarily know what they use to make up their tool. What metrics do they use? And we can have a conversation about that later. But I asked them what they value. I said, you sure don't value the state test because data that I know about you says you have a 60% opt-out rate. So I would ask, what do you value before I answer that question? So yes, the heart of when I look to make decisions, when I look at data, it's using this particular slide. So, Brad, I don't know if I Frankenstein your belief about how to use this, but that's the approach that I take.
The continuous improvement is all about where are you now and where do you want to be. I've been in tons of high-performing districts where you haven't seen them impact kids significantly as they progress through the system, you know, and I can cite a couple, you know, some that are in the backyard of very large tech organizations and things like that bring a different demographic to the table, right? So you can go to some of the highest performing districts in the nation. You can see, so comparing yourself and that it's not really helpful. What's most helpful is where are you now and where do you want to be? That's what's most helpful. And being able to describe that. And I would say even further, like I said, I use student learning data last so that people get into the habit of talking about demographically who we are, how we're seeing culture and identity and climate within our schools and how that's linked to the student learning outcomes. I think the most important thing is how have you identified need and what do you want to do about it? And then how can we support you in those change efforts? They should be creating a transparent process where you can follow that all the way through. And I'll tell you this, I've wrote a book about administering questionnaires within schools. The most difficult part of writing a questionnaire is not the questionnaire itself necessarily in the moment collecting that data. It's that it has to be connected to vision. It has to be connected to all the other types of data, has to be able to inform the plan. It should be all connected frontwards and backwards. And you as a board should be able to see that. And you should be able to see the asks. I think just getting this one document is transformative. I'm going to put it up on the screen real quickly. Getting this one document as a summary of what staffs have seen in their data and what they want to do about the need that they've identified in their data is transformative for districts. A single page. What I would encourage, I know that you probably there are data nerds on the board. I think what happens within boards even over time is that they become less concerned with looking at the data itself and they want to see evidence of analysis more and more and more. Show me the analysis. What did you find in the data? What are your action items? What are we supporting? And how does that all fit with the overall vision of the larger district? And so I think that that's probably one of the most important things that I would push it. I agree with your statement about just focusing on student learning data. You heard what I said at the beginning about that. It's very, very, very harmful. It tends to put blame on kids and fixing kids, not on fixing our programs and our processes to meet the needs of who we serve. And so I think it goes deeper than you probably think. Maybe not, maybe but I see that quite a bit. And so you want to go deeper for sure and get into the program and process place. That's the most important place to be.
My only question is, how do we get, clearly you need staff for this to be fully successful and work. How do we engage our staff to participate in this? Did we have the right secondary staff and at the training? I'm not sure who's on. I'm not sure who was there, right? So, you know, you need the participation for this to be successful, to apply the change.
So as Mike said, the site-based teams were there, but I see this multi-purpose, and he gave the perfect example tonight because Brad had us look at the program evaluation. So this is not just a site-based tool, in my opinion, it's also a curriculum tool. In that case, you would want a K-12 representation if you were to undergo, you know, a mathematics evaluation, so to speak. So yes, there will be problems that the site-based team will use this tool to uncover, discover, reflect on, but I see this having a huge impact on the curricular side of the world also. So there are a smattering of teachers, as you know, on site-based, but not the representation we would need to undergo a thorough curriculum analysis.
Could I address that real quickly? I'd like to make 2 points. Number one, it's very common for folks, I roll in, you know, and people are like, hey, he's talking about data, he's wearing a bow tie, this is going to be a real drag, right? 2 days of this, oh my goodness, you know. Usually the people that show up on the first days, there is an aha moment where they say, if I knew that this was what the focus was going to be, I would have invited this person, this person, this person. I would have changed up who the team members were going to be, right? There's always some of that. And I think when Mike and I talk and we delve into this a little bit more deeply, we're going to strategize about who needs to be represented in those. I brought that up when we first got together, because I think people come to data work with a compliance mindset, and it's my job to change that. And once I change it, then they say, oh, well, this is very different than what I thought it was going to be, right? And so you need to adjust to engage, but everyone on staff ultimately needs to be engaged in order for the work to be successful. The second thing is this. You probably already have structures in place that should be doing this work throughout the district to different degrees. PLCs, if you're doing PLCs within your schools and things like that. So there are some existing structures that are already in place that can take advantage of a framework and structured specific facilitation and tools to streamline the way that they work. Basically work smarter, not harder, right? So there are some existing structures and things that we can take advantage of. But that was a good point. That was a good question.
Well, Brad, thank you for your work with our teachers, your work with our site-based teams, your work with me. Brad, it was well. Brad did more for me, I think, than he may have done for other people, and he didn't know. It was my, I guess, 3rd week here, and I still had my eyes like I was deer in a headlight. So Brad was a friendly face and voice and a calming presence. So Brad, I appreciate you helping me transition into the district and the work you did with our site-based teams and our community in support of our students. So thank you, Brad.
Thank you, everyone. It was nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
Brad, we'll circle back.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, the next part of our meeting is our budget development process update. And I'll turn it back over to the administration.
Thank you. So we continue our budget development in anticipation of asking the board to adopt a budget for community consideration. So it's hard to follow the Little Mermaid staff. It's also hard to follow Brad, especially this time of the night after you've done a data presentation. I'm now going to ask you to look at another form of data in our budgetary figures. So Enrique and I will be presenting on some updates from our last session. So if we can go to the mission, I think you may be wondering why I always have on every one of my presentations our mission statement, and it's just what Brad said. That mission should be the heart of what we do in everything. And just as a reminder, I always have it for whoever is in a meeting with me, because I want that to be the focus. It may be a budget presentation, but it's a budget presentation within the realm of this mission. Just a reminder of our process. So we are about 2 weeks away when we request the board to adopt a budget. So we're still refining, we're still taking inputs, we're still adjusting. And this evening is a reflection of that continued work. Just a reminder about our current budget parameters on the next slide. And again, we discussed the line by line as there was some discussion about which of these parameters is the most important. I don't think any one of them are in a priority order, but we do hear that the budget not to exceed the tax cap is where we want to get. So we want to make sure we have that in mind when we talk about everything else that follows. Do we increase funding for substitute, as an example? Well, we have to do that within the realm of staying within other parameters that are out there. And we constantly monitor how one parameter, how one change in a parameter may impact another. Just an update on our tax cap calculation. Enrique did have to file with New York State based upon our data, our allowable tax cap. So we are allowed 4.1 levy increase, and that will be the tax cap figure that we are mandated by law if we are going to stay within the tax cap, that is there. There is provisions to go above the tax cap, but that's not a parameter the board has decided. And of course, you can always go lower than the tax cap. If we go to the next slide, we went into the line by line under a couple of business rules. We had mentioned that the line by line data that you would see was emblematic of where the district was in its budget development process of approximately the first week in February. The reason behind that is because we had to get you printed material to do a line by line by. So there was work that occurred before the line by line, and then of course after the line by line. So for those of you at home who may have seen a presentation of the line by line or last week, and now we're showing you we cut $1 million approximately. What were you trying to do to us? This is a long process in the making all the way back to February, the first week in February. So in that time period, we have reduced what you saw in that line by line in terms of our expenditures by the amounts here for the budget codes that are listed and with the brief explanation there. So I'll pause here. I know we asked to save questions till the end, but this is a pretty important slide. Are there questions about some of the adjustments we have made to the proposed budget?
One of my questions is just the salary codes for the 485. Are those confirmed retirements? Because I know we just had one, I think that was up on earlier this month. So I just want to make sure that those are confirmed, and assuming that we're going to have.
Yes, those are confirmed retirements.
Okay. Can you confirm what the building department reduction was for that 93,000?
Sure. So we started the zero-based budgeting process by asking all of our administrators, tell us what you need from zero in each of your budget codes, supply materials, conference requests. Very little comes out of a building-based budget, by the way. They have very little control over a portion of the budget. They have supplies, materials, some conference requests, and OC services that are normally centralized, some equipment lines, very, very small portions of our overall budget, but it is important to them because that's how they run their building in the particular way they see fit. So we asked them to give us their zero-based budget of what they need to run their building the best way possible. That was in early December. They came to us with their initials. We looked at it. We knew where we probably had to be eventually, and we made some, thanks for putting that in there. Keep it in mind. We need to know that because if we have the opportunity to make that enhancement, we will definitely come back to it. But we did an initial, please go back and give us your better thought. We didn't give them any figures. We just said, take it back, work with your teams, try to refine this and pare it down a little bit because we don't want the community, the superintendent, or the board to have a heart attack with a $70 million increase, right? When you give educators carte blanche, they definitely want to give your students the best opportunity. So we had to refine a little bit. Then as we received more parameters from the board in early January, and as we came to February, we realized we also knew a little bit more about what our tax cap might look like based upon inputs. We went back to them and said, we're going to give you a starting point. We'd like everybody to cut by 10%. We're not going to tell you what at this time. Look at your budgets on your priorities and cut your overall budget by 10%. So they engaged in that, and that $93,000 reduction is that 10% reduction that we asked them to pay.
You know, what is the parochial service here for the 100,000?
Sure. So when there are students located in our geographic district catchment area, and they attend a private or parochial school, there is there's two categories. Enrique, correct me if I'm wrong. They attend a school, a private or parochial school that's in another district. That district provides them with health services that we have to reimburse that district for. Bless you. And if our student, Enrique, the other category is that we send their students textbooks. Yes, thank you. So you'll see that textbook line as well.
So, but I think
that was from the line by line.
Right. So when we looked at the line by line, we saw we were continuously estimating more and spending less. So I think that's what they went back and evaluated. What are we actually spending?
There were two lines I think that we saw that were like excessively over budgeted repeatedly, and we had asked you to look at.
Yeah.
So for process, that line by line gave us as the administration parameters to move forward with to help refine the budget. Hopefully that you feel comfortable adopting. So, as we know, a big component of our budget is staffing. These are some adjustments and estimated salary adjustments that we made in particular in staffing. This is current and captures the entire development process. So we already know about the 5 special ed. That's through varying FTE and contractual codes to support the new program. That was in your figures presented the line by line, as was the flag football coach, 3 athletic site directors. The 1 technology integration specialist, that was a request. That has, when we went through the line by line, we identified that position was able to be funded within a particular code. We are also looking to add 1 administrator for human resources. Through retirement, we were able to reduce FTE through that amount there, and we also aligned or reallocated a portion of a salary to a appropriate aligned grant code that can help us fund that and offset the general fund.
For the HR?
No, that's for a separate position.
We can ask questions now? Okay. So this is the only staff changes that we're expecting to see for next year?
We're not done yet.
Okay.
We're not done yet. Okay. We're still in the scheduling process at the secondary. And also as we go through this process, there may be changes even through after the board adopts that we might be able to make some adjustments based upon staffing. Do we have as an example.
And that could be plus or minus.
Could be plus or minus. Oftentimes what you'll see is many districts have a contingent position in a budget. I don't believe we have any contingent positions, correct? Because what that does is it reduces to a true 0 line item budget. But if you have changes in need that require staffing, you are then trying to find money to pay for that.
Aside from special ed, though, correct?
You don't have any special ed contingent positions either.
I thought she always budgeted for 1 more.
No, this time. This time she budgeted for 2 more, and they are in the budget.
2 more that we're getting, or 2 more that
2
we
more
don't
positions.
Know? Are we definitely getting those 2?
My understanding is yes, but she said that maybe not. But my understanding is at this point, yes.
And so,
you say getting, you need
yes.
Hiring.
Like
that we actually are hiring, that we're 100% hiring.
And I want to be clear.
But he's saying me.
We're presenting you figures with that in mind, but we are still building schedules. Even at the elementary, it's simpler at the elementary. We're looking at shared staff schedules. We're still building schedules at the middle school, and adjustments can lead to other adjustments that can have a ripple effect. So I just want you to, I know we're almost to the goal, but there's still changes that can occur, and we present this data to be transparent, but also in a trust that it's not a gotcha moment, because there are a lot of changes.
Do we have an estimated time? Okay.
Well, estimated time for scheduling is right now we're in the process of reviewing course requests. I'll give secondary as an example of the high school, and looking at some of those courses that may or may not run, that then tell us what staff we may or may not need, and then that may or may be able to make adjustments to. All right, next steps, which you set me up perfectly for it. So we're going to make continued adjustments prior to requesting board adoption at 327. In general terms, we are at a point in our budget that we need to look at approximately $100,000 left to reduce to get to that 4.1% levy increase. So that's where we're at. Next slide. So there was requests to do some comparative data. I do want to remind you that we are, as a school district, allowed to present one budget to the community to vote on. So I want to be clear that the data that we are presenting here reflects comparative purposes, and it's also accurate as of 3/7. There's already been some changes to some of these variables, but it was accurate as of 3/7. And on the next couple of slides, this data that we're looking at only reflects elementary full-time equivalency visitors. So I'll start with the summary first, then we'll go through the specifics. The attendance zone policy as adopted of 5110 increases total elementary FTE by 1.5 positions. That reflects general ed, special area teachers, and teaching assistant staff time. That monetized is $160,000. We could, which we haven't included, but we could consider repurposing the 2 TAs to save FTE for needs in special education. And if that's done, that could save an approximate, that costed out as approximately $100,000 of salary and benefits. So the data that makes up this summary is on the next slide. So this is your general education and special areas. And numbers at the bottom may not reflect FTE in the budget. We tried to delineate that in the changes category because we could be repurposing, so it's not a budget add. It's just a repurposing of staff from an area to another area with a particular need. In the next slide, you'll see special education. So again, you'll see the numbers show a 2% or 2 position increase, but those may not necessarily be reflected in a budget need to cover that because it's repurposed. And then the final slide is teaching assistants. Continuing on with comparative data, we are comparing the financial projections at every board meeting we've been projecting out. And I apologize, there's a 0 that we will update on that on the second bullet. Just caught that, I apologize. We've been projecting out financial projections as a way to show the district how this year's financial decisions are being monitored in a way to make sure that we can weather the loss of our cessation funds, along with the $24 million that are causing us to be able to require those cessation funds, to not raise taxes to a level that may be unsustainable. Again, as a school district, we have very few options to balance the budget. You can raise revenues through certain ways, or you can cut expenses. So this data, again, is current as of 3/7, and this does include the additional staff that we mentioned. So if we go to the next slide, these are just some of the summary of the impacts that you'll see on the next 2 slides. So this is the projection of the adopted. If we stayed with the figures in the attendance zone policy adopted on 12/6, and then the next slide shows if we were to stay in current or next year current configuration of our elementary schools. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. Just a reminder of our budget vote as we continue to update you. The next slide will tell us contingent budget rules.
And we go through these slides every meeting. Don't want to bore you to death, but also want to keep them on our radar as official notices. And then that's the end. I'll yield to any questions. Mark? Yes. So subject 9.4 was the financial projections contained in that agenda item. I'm sorry, 9.4 are those two financial projections that Greg displayed with us.
I just wanted to confirm, just looking at the projections and what I would say policy 5110. It shows that our projections in the tax levy would be 4.1%, and in the current configuration, it's 3.28%. I guess one of my questions, because I see on here for the UPK, it still looks like there's zero that's been allocated in 5110, and I'm assuming that's because the Y would be used there. So those teachers are just going to go back into. Okay. So my question is, these projections don't reflect the deduction of those teachers, right? It's still, because it says it's still included here, that UPK would still have two in the Princeton plan model. So we're going to be paying for those two teachers, the two TAs, and all their benefits in the projections going forward.
So I did not add a variable of using an outside partner in the current model because I wanted to remain true to the current model.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, so I guess in the projections overall, you're going to have two teachers and two TAs that are being carried over in the Princeton plan for about, I don't know, $430,000 as you go year over year in those projections. That's removed from policy 5110.
Hold on, Tamika, this is explained here on the repurposing of the staff.
Correct.
We're keeping them and repurposing them to apply the need for the student.
That's for 5110, but what he's saying is, if you look at the sheet, UPK still has two teachers and two TAs that are going to be left in this overall projection that hasn't been deducted.
No, because they're in that.
In the projection?
They're in the projection.
Since the beginning, since the first day, we agreed that even before we knew that we got a contracted UPK, we agreed that it was going to be contracted.
Yes.
Okay. So
since the beginning, the two teachers and the two teaching assistants that today are in the class were repurposed to other grades. So they are part of the original budget. So they are in the budget, but probably as a first grade teacher and as a kindergarten teacher. I don't know where you repurpose them, but they are repurposed.
So for purpose of the FTE projection, they're shown there. But in terms of the financial projections, they're shown as if we were contracting with an outside vendor. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes. That's why our budget is going up so much, $640,000. I'm sorry, $400,000 of our budget is an increase compared to last year because that was the increase that we got in state aid. That is just a transfer.
Right.
So you'll see it on the revenue and the expense side.
Exactly. And I think we discussed that also since the beginning, if I don't,
yeah, I guess
if I'm not mistaken.
my question on the expenditures that I asked for, it just shows $360,000 is the deduction, which would be just the moving costs and the one teacher ad, right? Right, but shouldn't there be a deduction of $430 on the expenditures for Plan A based on removing those two teachers?
No, because those, again, no matter what happens, we stay or we move to the new plan, the only variable is 1.5 teachers. That's the only variable, because the contracting UPK company is going to bring their own teachers, their own everything, no matter what type of model we use. So the only difference in cost, and I will say that I'm wrong by saying the only two differences are the 1.5 teachers and the $250,000 in moving costs. Nothing else should change. You know, transportation might go up a little bit, might be down a little bit, maybe because we're going to lose some transportation aid, because now you're back to neighborhood schools and you're still picking up Johnny across the street from Franchi Lindsay and bringing it to Franchi Lindsay. So we did not take into account, because we don't know, because last time we were off, and we didn't want to be off, how much more is it going to cost us or less, because in this case, you go back to neighborhood schools, but that's going to be reflected in your state aid the following year, because now your state aid is going to go to your, when I said state aid, I mean transportation aid, will be going down. So we let those costs as neutral.
And that was 550,000, I think, that we got this year, more of an increase than last year.
Over transportation?
Yeah.
No.
No?
That's where I was raising my hand. Because it was supposed to be around 150,000. I don't think we ever saw that fully, did we?
The increase, no. Let me try to get to
if my memory serves, there was two components to the change in the transportation aid. Yes. Correct me if I'm wrong. What happened was we were originally told that the increase in transportation aid was a result of additional. And again, I do not want to make a statement and have it be wrong. So if I'm going to qualify this with, as I recall, please correct me if I'm wrong. We were originally told that the additional transportation aid increase was going to be because of the additional miles driven. And since more kids were going to be more than a mile or whatever it was from their home, we were getting this windfall to offset the additional cost. That turned to be, let's say, incorrect. I think what we found was that the increase in transportation aid was predominantly result in our wealth ratio change, which was unrelated to the additional distance driven. The additional distance driven netted us plus or minus $30,000. If my memory serves correctly.
Almost there. Almost. If you look at how they compute transportation aid, it will be very, very difficult for us to know which part came from the extra miles and which part came because of our wealth ratio. But I will agree 90% what you say, that a big part of our increase in transportation aid was because of wealth ratio. What percentage? I would have to spend days trying to figure out their formula and what part of that formula is wealth ratio and what part of that formula is increased expenses, increased mileages. but basically, yes. I mean, that's why the best way to compare these two models is to just leave transportation aid as neutral. Whatever extra expense will come back in transportation because it might be even zero.
Thank you.
Does anybody have questions for MBK? Probably. Did you have questions before?
So I know that we have budgeted $250,000 for the move. Do we have any idea if we're gonna come? Are we definitely coming in there? Might it potentially be lower? Do we have estimates yet?
Yes.
Yes.
And we feel that we're very close to that number. I mean, we can be within $10,000 up or down, but Anthony believes that we're very close to that number.
Any hope that it could be less?
I guess there's always hope, but I wouldn't lower it in the budget.
I want to make sure, Tamika, I want to make sure that you're totally clear on your question around the staff.
Well, I guess he's saying it. There's no deduct, but there should be a deduct if you're showing it that you're repurposing those two FTEs in 5110, then there should be a negative cost associated with 2425 or the Princeton plan model, which would be a deduction. Because if you're not moving those teachers in Princeton plan, they're in UPK right now with those two TAs.
Yeah, but
we're moving it. We're moving it, no?
So in your argument, so let me just I want to make sure that we're all on the same page because this is very, very important. So in your argument, how you're viewing it is different than I'm viewing it. So how I'm viewing it is we actually would need more staff in 5110, and you're looking at it as we would need less staff.
We need Princeton
plan. You're saying we need less staff, and I'm looking at as we need more staff because we're repurposing two staff members that are currently here to apply for a need in AIS and AIS. So if we stayed in the current plan, we would not be able to. We would have to hire two teachers to cover the AIS need. Do you see how I see it when I look at this?
Right, but I'm just looking at the UPK numbers because you're using that as a delta. That's a negative for 5110.
It's a positive.
It's a positive. No, because it's a negative because you're using the outsource YMCA if that's the provider that's selected. So that cost isn't carried over. That's reflected in there.
But Jeremy wants to.
There's a question that's being raised that I think would be simply clarified if we could identify whether the Y would come and do a UPK for two classrooms. Because I believe if we stay in the current model, there's only two classrooms for the Y or for UPK in-house. And as a result, if they're not willing to come for two, then you can't deduct that staff unless you're going to cut that program. So I don't know that the Y is offering a collaboration opportunity for simply two UPK classes. And that's my interpretation. I'm not saying.
I know. I'm just saying we haven't gone down that road, but if we're going to do a line by line item, if the assumption is made for plan B, why wouldn't it be made for plan A?
Because they have 7 classrooms to plan B.
Okay, so is the assumption that the two TAs and the two teachers were not deducted from the overall expenditures? In plan A.
In plan A. Say that again.
I said, is the assumption to be made that the two teachers and the two TAs in the UPK has not been applied the same way as it has in plan B for its reduction because it's going to apply?
No. Can you explain this?
So the struggle that we're having as an administrative team, me in particular, is we are comparing projections that have a number of different externalities once you start to change one thing. And we tried to keep it as simple as possible. So for instance, we kept the understanding that if we move to 5110 and 2425 as adopted, we would be having the Y as the provider. And that we would have those two teachers go back into our teaching staff to then apply for AIS services in math and English. We did not, in the Princeton plan model, apply those teachers for math AIS and reading AIS, which we see as a need. And subsequently, we were trying to keep everything as clean as possible. So therefore, we did not change the structure of the current model. There was just too many variables because we would then have to project out in 24-25 Princeton plan model how those AIS teachers and math teachers would be paid for as well. So we tried to keep it as simple. Was it perfect? No.
I understand that, but I just think that the benefits and salaries in the projections going forward in the years is not going to be apples to apples either, because that deduction isn't shown. So that's why I'm saying that the projections overall are going to be flawed itself as well, because once you take that into account, since you're saying it wasn't taken into account, that shows a whole different number, which would actually bring it down even less than what it is in right now.
Well, no, A also doesn't show the added support. So then you would also need to project A to get an additional AIS and an additional ENL teacher, which isn't reflected in that position either, in the projection either.
Or the special program.
So if we were to add an ENL and an AIS teacher to the existing model, which is a way for us to better educate and support kids to be at grade level, we would have to add those two teachers in the existing model, which also isn't reflected.
But in here, the only thing that I got from the expenditures in K-12 instructional programs, non-salaries, they're exactly the same, right? So if you're using those same numbers, the only number that changed in K-12 instructional salaries is it shows Plan B having $110,000 less than Plan A, which is what's confusing to me. Because if we need to add more staff, right, but you're deducting staff in the other one, shouldn't it be a add of the one FTE, 1.5, which was $160,000? Because that's what the slide said, right?
Yes.
Right. So
say that again.
What are you looking at so we know?
I'm looking at this that was given to me. For the breakdown of expenditures that I requested.
I don't have that.
It was emailed to everyone. And it shows that there's just a difference in salaries for K-12 of just $110,000, and Plan B is less in that model. But it should be $160,000 based on the 1.5 FTE that's presented on that slide. So that's why I'm saying the numbers on here, if it's not apples to apples, right? It still shows that Plan A is still costing less than going to Plan B.
And again, we can revisit this. We wanted to get information in front of people. There is a struggle that I have to give you accurate projections of projections. Right? We know that any variable. So, for instance, is it accurate to say, Enrique, that if we were to do those adds, they would also change the tax cap in both of those? That we would have to then lower the amount that we would. The tax cap may be lower, so it would require additional budgetary cuts to fit within that, to then also change some of the structures within that we presented as parameters.
Are they talking about what I gave you this morning? I just want to make sure. If you look at what I gave you this morning, the only difference is for next year, $110,000 of the 1.5 teacher salary. Okay. And I don't know which one you are referring as Plan A and Plan B. But for me, the hybrid model is the one that's $110,000. So I don't know which one is Plan A, Plan B. I really don't, you know, they show it to me as Plan A and Plan B rather than hybrid and Princeton plan.
Yeah.
But in my numbers, like I told Mike, the only difference is $250,000 in the facility, non-salary facilities, plus $110,000 of 1.5 teachers. Why 105? Because I'm not nowhere they asked me to include benefits. So the other 40,000 would have gone to benefits. They only asked me to include salaries and non-salaries of K-12. It also never it never asked me to include ERS, Social Security, anything else. So that's what I did. That's why the difference is not 410, which would have been 250 plus 160. The difference is only 250 plus 110, 360 in those numbers. I just want to let everyone know that those numbers in some cases are double counted. So if someone asks me, Enrique, how much is in benefits and capital, it's not only $16 million, it is 84, it's a lot more. But I have to double count because they asked me to say PPS, total budget for PPS, and then budget for administrators. So I counted the 3 PPS administrators in PPS, and I count them again in administrators. So it was wrong to ask for the totals, but that's what they asked for me, because the totals cannot relate to the totals of our budget if we add benefits and capital, because I'm double counting the law. For example, a big double count is they ask me K-12 instructional salaries. You include PPS. And then they ask me PPS salaries. So those salaries are double counted.
Anybody else? Question?
Thinking we can answer my question. I was also, one of the things I was wondering is, because it's a half staff member, there was a note somewhere about this, the half staff member being a current staff member. I don't know. I thought I saw a note somewhere in one of our things about this.
So, as Mike said, there's still, the 3 elementary principals are still working their schedule. And there was conversation the other day on Tuesday's meeting, because they're not yet finished trying to tweak who can borrow which teacher. It may well be that that is an existing staff member who will fill the 0.5, and it will not be an increase. So we're still waiting for them to figure out, like, if there's a high school PE teacher that can walk down to FGL and fill Jim's need, then we won't have to have 0.5. 0.5 will be internal.
So, okay. It's also that.
Right.
And especially in the shared staff.
Yeah.
And especially in, especially in special areas, there's often year to year a number of shared staff that have to travel.
So I was going to actually, a couple of my questions were just because we have Mrs. Tehan came and asked questions, and I think that we can answer them some of them really easily here. So the first, I think it's important because it's reflected in what we're talking about, and I think it's valuable for the entire community to understand. So STEAM is going back into the classroom.
No, science.
Science going back to the classroom, STEAM is remaining.
Yes.
And there will be a split. But the art's been moving. Art has been moving. We've been sharing art staff amongst the 3 buildings currently. Have we been sharing E&L staff? I feel like we've been sharing E&L staff amongst the buildings. Yeah. So a lot of the support staff right now is moving, including our special areas, right?
This year, we're also sharing reading staff.
And reading staff,
I mean, our speech and language.
Oh, yes. Those
Our
people are
OTs,
shared.
PTs.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So people share all models, all that we've had, all that we're using, and
it's common.
Yes.
Every district. Well, for the elementaries, I guess it's gonna be a little trickier when you get to the sharing with the secondary with the elementary. So you have to double check certifications or ask for.
Certification. Right, the certifications
Not
are
the
K.
specialist.
The special area people, yes, they're K-12s. The tricky part becomes the building start and end times being different, but the administration is so used to making that work. You know, I start on this time, then I have to end on that same time. I can't extend the person's day. So they're pretty good about saying, you know, you come to me at this time, and then we have to end you at the time that you started a prior building. We have a number of people this year who are working that way because we need to have that happen.
Oh, because the elementary schools all start at different times. So.
Right. And they will next year as well.
There are staff shared among middle school as well.
That's right. Yes, we have high school and middle school staff that share. So there's always somewhere where there is a shared need, just because some specials happen multiple times in a cycle, some only happen once in a cycle. So.
One of my questions is just on the projections that were done. Back on 2.7, our projections in 2023-24, there was a variance that was $3.25 million, and now we've changed it to $3 million. Can you explain why that was done?
Yes, because we've been spending a lot of money this year, and I don't think I can get to the $3.25 million. If we got a tax resorting a couple of days ago that you just approved the transfer for $95,000. We've been getting very high billings from the lawyers and other expenses that no one was predicting. So back in January, I thought we could get to 350. Today, I say there's no way I can get to 350 in savings. So what I want everyone to understand is that this is not a balance sheet as of one day and it stays that day. We were projecting. If you remember the first week in January, we were talking about substitute teachers, and we said substitute teachers, we are at 200,000, and I projected that if between September and January we were at 200 over, and it's half the year, then I should put 400 for the rest of the year. Well, it's a month later and we're at 400. I mean, I'm just saying, and I can tell you many others that are like that. So maybe by the end of the year, I can say, well, we were able to save here, let's put it back to 350, or maybe I would tell you, you know what? We need to move it to 250 because these other expenses just came. It's fluid. I cannot one day say, this is where we are, and not change it.
Enrique, could you explain the role of the budget variance in that projection? What role does that role play?
The budget variance is basically what a corporation will call it an operating profit. In your house will be your savings because you got a better bonus that you were expecting, or you have less expenses. Basically, that's what it is. Is the variance that will happen during the year between our expenditures and our revenues. So that variance can happen for two reasons. Either because we get more revenues, suddenly, someone donates money or more donations, interest rates shot up, like it happened last year. So we have more revenue. So that's one way to do it. Usually we're very close on those. It's very unusual that, that our projections in revenues are way off. It's mainly in the expense. I think that the board has seen you've approved all the extra expenses that happened after our last year's budget. There were 3 elementary school teachers, there were superintendent expenses, legal expenses, tax accessory expenses. Now we also, you just approved, I think, paying the principals of the high school. That's another big amount that I wasn't expecting. It was in the $3.5 million that it's reducing it to 3.
If we have more expenses, isn't that variance supposed to be more? Or would it, you're just taking from there is what you're saying? Yes. So you're reducing it year over year. Okay. And I guess that's the same thing that was done too for this on this sheet. It's the same thing for 28 to 29 and 29 to 30. So 28 to 29, we had, it's now 4.25 million instead of the $4.5 million that was carried on the 27 budget. And 29 to 30, it's now 1.8 million instead of the $2 million, which helps us to get a little bit more than the $588,000 that was in our 2030 projections before, got us up to $1,038,000 now. That's right. And I guess what's the reasoning for changing those as well going forward? Why didn't we just keep the same numbers?
Going forward, I was expecting every year about $2 million in positive variance. And I moved in most of the cases, I kept them. In some other cases, I reduced them because I think that in the year 26, 27, we have a bond mature, and therefore we might have more money during that year. If it's $454,000. So if the board in 2025, 26 decides we're not doing a bond to make it neutral, we're not doing anything, then you have $454,000 more.
And again, we're looking at
it's just a projection.
We're looking at projections out to 2030 with our best estimate. For context, there were projections about this year's tax cap done in 2018, estimating that we would be about a 9% tax cap. Next year being at a 10% tax cap. So we're trying to read the proverbial tea leaves as best we can.
No, if you look starting in 24. In 25, 26, I have a $2 million variance every year, and that's how I always had it. I don't remember changing because I don't know what's going to happen 3 years down the road. But the idea that this has always been my idea, and don't confirm it, is that you need to assume that you need to, you don't run your company, your household, knowing that at the end of the year, you're going to run at a 0 zero profit, whatever you want to call it. Because if the day before your son breaks his arm, you have to take him to the doctor, and how are you going to pay for the doctor? So that's the same assumption here. My assumption is that the future assistant superintendent are going to say, I'm going to try every year to save $2 million. If there's 1 year that I don't save $2 million, let's say that it's only $1 million, your following year, your tax levy will increase an additional 2%. Same as why if you look at the proposed budgets, why I said the proposed budget starting in 27-28 is 2% every year, and the year before is 1.57. While, because if you add the $434,000 of the bond that matures, that will give you the 2%. So since the beginning, the board always said we want to stay at a 2% increase. So if that's what your goal is in the future, then you have to stay at the 2%. If tomorrow you tell me, no, our goal is 4%, okay. Then instead of being $100 million, it's going to be 102, and instead of being 5.24% tax levy increase, it's going to be a 7.24%. One goes with the other one. You want to spend more, you need to pay for more.
Thank you.
Really quickly, just back to the 2018 numbers that were quoted as 9.33%, which is what 2024-25 would be right now. I just want to remind everyone that our state aid at that time was $13.1 million, and we're getting $14.9 million. It also showed a revenue of $21 million, and our revenue now is $37 million. So there's $16 million more that we're getting between all of the state aid, the cessation fund that was not included in those numbers that is being shown here. So that's why it was so high. But we have it now, and our increase last year was 0.10. So I think to compare to 2018, there's all these other factors in there that are that projection did not take into account.
Correct, and I use that as reference, not to show accuracy, but to say how hard it is.
Yeah, it's a fluid situation that's happening, and I guess that's my other question for Enrique. With everything going on with the foundation aid, if $1 million comes off of this 2024, the state cuts us, what happens to us in those projections?
Yeah, like I said, every $520,000 in reduction of revenue is 1% more in the tax levy compared to this number.
In general terms, we'd have to revisit. And that's the case that most school districts deal with every year, right up until the budget of the state legislature is not finalized. We're open changes right up until the end.
I mean, you will have to do exactly what we did this year 3 weeks ago when Holtec said, I'm not giving you $4 million, I'm only giving you 3.4. Well, we need to put another 600 votes. There's nothing else we can do.
Are those numbers reflected in these?
Yes, absolutely, yes. Here, you can see it here, pilots. You see pilot of $6 million, but remember we have a lot more pilots.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any questions on this side? Ben? Okay. Great. No more questions, then we'll move to committee reports. Committee reports. I know we just saw each other. We don't move to next week. Okay. Board comments and new business.
I wanted to bring back up the conversation that we were having last on the motion that I put.
And then I guess the word right?
I believe the motion was tabled at the last meeting, so,
Go back to it. And I believe the next one. It had a second. Right?
Right.
So it's open for discussion. Would anybody like to discuss Tamika's motion, change policy 5110? I guess the motion needs to be to bring it back. That's a policy, because you can't vote on it. We have to bring the motion back to the table. So that's where we're at. Okay. We did the motion, we seconded and all that to bring it back.
It was already seconded at the last meeting.
So it's open for discussion. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Let anybody go?
Any questions? You're part of the discussion.
I'm just waiting for anybody to ask any questions on it. And just looking at these projections right now and going back and forth on this, the Princeton plan, if we stayed in it, is 3.28%. And the Plan B, policy 5110, would be 4.10%. There's also year over year, there's different costs that are in there. And from our discussion today, the UPK factor was not taken into these numbers. So with Enrique's numbers of 520 is 1% tax levy, if we took out that UPK number, there could also still be a reduction to these projections that are shown here. I think just in us as a board, just sitting here and evaluating and just looking at this, I think it's important for us to know that we've done a lot of work and we've already spent a lot of money on consultants, workshops, and everything else. And the truth is, going into 5110 is not saving us any money. It's costing us money. It's been costing us money. It's there in black and white as to where it is right now. And I just think, given the state of just the foundation aid, state aid, everything else that's been presented, and the fluidity of that, I think it would be bad for us to say, we're going to go right to the cap. And if there's any issues, anything that pops up, like we got a presenter today, I think everything he presented was amazing. We want it, but we're already at cap. So what are we cutting in order to get that? And in my mind, I feel like we as a board, given our financial state right now, should be very wary in the way we proceed forward. We have a chance to look at these numbers. Yes, everybody voted, I get that. But given our financial state in this district right now, I think it's imperative that we take a second look, we reevaluate what we're doing. And we know for a fact that there is work that needs to be done also at FGL to be done. The cafeteria work is $750,000. That's not a cost we're including here, but that's a cost of something that needs to happen. So I think overall, we need to just, as a group and as a board, sit down financially and think about what's best for this district. Because I can tell you right now, there's a lot of people, with inflation even, we're carrying 2%. What if that changes to 3% or 4% because of the times that are changing? We have seniors that are living on a fixed income, and to ask them to pay more, to spend more money on something, I just think it's not responsible. So that's my piece.
I'm gonna call myself. That's okay with you guys. I have a couple of thoughts. My first thought is that this conversation started around money and finances, and then it circled back around again, and we talked about money and finances. And then I thought that we learned that this was about children and not just about the dollars and cents. If this is about finances, I would probably say to the board something like, well, maybe the original model was most cost effective. Our buildings were built for K-5. Our community was structured that way. Now, after everything I've learned, I don't necessarily think that's the way to do it. But if we're going to talk dollars and cents, you probably need to go back to the old model and perhaps only have services in one place and all of those things, because I'm pretty sure that that may have been most cost effective. So I don't really want to focus personally on dollars and cents. I thought that we were doing something that was both beneficial for children within our means. We're talking about very small differences, and a way to give everybody a little bit of what they wanted. So that's my piece. I'm not going to carry on about any of it. I just hate that we're back to a place where we're talking about, you know, one teacher here, one student there.
I want to respond to you, but I want to.
Yeah, we're going to let everybody say something.
Everybody.
I'm going to wait and see if there's anything that comes up with responding at this point.
It's a different conversation. It's not pertaining to this.
So there's a dollar factor, but there's also a human factor, right? We just heard a parent talk about the effects of what going to Plan B is going to do to their child. There's also one child that's going to be an E&L student in Furnace Woods and one ICT student, right? Think about the isolation that child is going to have to face and be around in a building with nobody that they can actually communicate with, right? And then you're also saying that people are going to travel, teachers are going to travel. Well, what are they doing while they're traveling? And how are we assessing that? The other thing that I think we need to look at as a board is EV is going to have 80 students who are categorized as economically disadvantaged. That's double the 40 that's going to be at Furnace Woods. And are we as a board allocating additional resources to that building to ensure that those children's needs are being met in the building? Right? I've asked for the per building, but I haven't gotten that yet. These are all questions we have to ask, because it's not just about dollars and cents. It's actually about our children and what we're doing. And I think that's important that we take the time to mindfully just sit and analyze this and talk about it, because it has real ramifications long-term for our district, but also long-term for our students and our families. And I think that's just important that as a board, we discuss it and look at it. I understand that. Why are we looking at it again? Well, we have to look at it. We have new information that's now been presented to us. We're at cap. We still have to cut $100,000, and the projections clearly show the Princeton plan is 3.28%. So if we know that we're in something that we can save money in, right? Because the auditor said we need to save $10 million by 2030. Why not go to 3.75, still be under cap and save some money for a rainy day so that our district has a softer landing in the end? So that's my point. And when I say it's all about dollars, and it's not, it has a wider implication than just dollars and cents for me.
Not going to cap doesn't save money for a rainy day. Not going to cap means you never get the money ever again. And then it also impacts your ability to utilize those dollars tomorrow from a budgetary perspective. Additionally, part of it is a singular expense that's now into our budget and gives us flexibility next year, because we budgeted a one-time expense and our increase next year is built upon that number. We have fluidity with the utilization of those funds next year and every year thereafter, plus the compounded interest effect that goes down. For me, it's fairly simple. We add an AIS support, which gives kids what they need. We add ENL, which gives kids what they need. We add a true universal pre-K program that costs our local taxpayers $0. 7 classrooms, plus or minus, are going to have access to UPK. We now have a pre-K4 lottery for 36 kids that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars for our local taxpayer. This does not do that. If we don't want to give a support of an additional AIS and an additional ENL teacher, then that's a separate conversation. And Plan B will offer you the opportunity to reduce that expenditure and get yourself back inside a non-recurring revenue expense and reduce the overall expenditure. So for me, I'm not $100,000 on an $80 whatever million budget is a negligible expense when we're talking about a community-wide true universal pre-K program and supports for kids who need them. At some point, we're splitting hairs, I think. And when I think back to the experts that we hired, they all said, I don't care how we arrange your students. I care about the supports we give them. And they all focused, in my recollection, was fewer transitions are better. So I don't want to continue having the conversation. The work was done. I hear you on a budgetary concern, but I think when we think of the fluidity of these budgetary projections, we're giving students more for the delta of a recurring $100,000 expense and a one-time move expense. And if we really wanted to go line by line, then we just remove the supports, which I don't support doing, and then we can turn this into 2 fewer FTEs by making the adjustment to the planned organizational structure for next year.
My only comment is when you talk about doing work at buildings and where we need to add 750 to Frank G, we had not addressed the issue at Furnace Woods because there's also issues there with their serving room because it doesn't really accommodate the number of kids there. So there's we have one problem here, but then there's another problem here, just like the bathroom situation in the buildings, right? So if we want to make everything perfect for everyone, there's going to be a dollars and cents attached to that. That's why it's so hard to say, well, we are going to spend this amount of money at the high school on this, or we're going to spend this amount of money at the middle school on this. What we did with the elementary schools was we allocated based on where the students would be going, but we're not considering that we'd have to do work at the other building to accommodate students. So $750,000 to make Frank G. Lindsay what it needs to be to upgrade the serving area doesn't assume, because we didn't consider it, what that would be the serving area in front of it, right?
Short statement. I just want to say that I think we are at a place where everybody's got to compromise to come together to do what's best for kids. And that's, I think, where we are.
I just want to say, I understand you're saying that there's other work that needs to be done, but if you calculate all the bathrooms, all the cafeteria stuff that needs to be done, it all comes out in those 3 buildings to be $2.95 million worth of expenses, right? So if we're saying that there's changes that we need to be made, or the things that need to be done, it could be done, I'm sure, for less than $2.5 million. Reduce the move that would be in there as well, and save us money overall in paying for the loan. So that's my question. If we have all these things, if it's already lower than what we're going to, why would we even do it to go over there? And there was a comment made that all of the consultants said that transitions were bad. The consultant said that transitions can be dealt with from, let me just preface this by saying my recollection of it is transitions can be dealt with if we put the necessary tools in place to make it easier for those children, which we have never done at all on this, at all. It's never been done to make it easier. We've just, that part has been skipped over, right? And that could probably cost $0 and 0 cents to the district if we really wanted to focus on that.
Okay, I want to go around once more. Otherwise,
I'm thinking you only spoken.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say, Tamika, I hear you 100%. You know where my loyalty lies. Just reading the room, I am proud of you for speaking up and just speaking your piece. I just know that we have to move with our collective group. But I applaud you for always bringing to light any information that you would like to. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anybody have anything else to add? Good. Okay, so at this time, if the discussion is done, I need to call the question, which is essentially the vote. So
Oh, I need a second. Okay, so me calling the question for a decision requires a second. So I'm making a motion. Second. Okay. Then I guess yeah, but are we voting on Tamika's motion? Wait, I thought. Right. So Tamika's motion is to revise policy 5110. So that is what needs to be voted on. Her motion? So her motion, Tamika, your motion, correct me if I'm wrong, was to bring 5110 back to the table.
It was to reverse.
To reverse.
For the implementation of 5110.
And Amelia had seconded it.
Correct.
Does that second still stand? Sorry, we're checking parliamentary procedure.
That brought the motion to the table.
Okay.
It was tabled.
Okay, and then I'm calling the question.
We discussed, you called the question, you have a second. I just wanted to bring the motion.
But we're voting on Tamika's motion.
Correct.
Okay. So is it all in favor of Tamika's motion?
You can do roll call or you can do it.
Okay, let's do that. That's easier. So we'll start with Tamika. We're voting in favor or not in favor of your motion. Okay, Steph? Erica?
Should say that.
Say yea or nay, please.
No. Yes. I mean, yes, sorry.
Yes or no? We're
confused now.
No.
Yes.
No. Me, I'm no. Jen? No.
No.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion did not carry. 2 yeses, 5 noes. Any other new business? Okay. Do I have a motion to vote up?
Going back to that.
Okay, so the board is now complete executive session. We have to head back into executive session. I don't think I have to repeat that. We're going back. We did not finish for earlier in that.
That's what I did.
Nope. We are. We need to vote to go.
Yep.
I need a motion to go into exec. Motion to go into exec. Second, all in favor?